it again. We'll take it from the top. 3, 2, 1. David, it's great to see you again. Welcome back.
Hey, Mark. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Good to be back.
We are here to talk about something special that's been a few months in the making. Not a criticism, David. It's the Q2 24 market share report. Can you, for our audience, can you give us a high level sense as to what the market share report conveys?
I'll frame it as a headline, and a headline that maybe you nor supermarkets would really want to hear, but it's Walmart continues to capture more share of eGrocery as they reach a new record at the end of second quarter.
So that's, and I'm glad you framed it that way, because I got a few comments that I want to make, and then we can get into some of the questions. So what I'm hearing from retailers, both large regionals and small regionals, is that they're getting their butts kicked by Walmart.
Right.
And I was talking to our VP of Retail Operations earlier today, and he says, the Walmart has this philosophy of beat 'em, and bury 'em, and that Walmart's going to throw whatever they can to capture as much market share as, and I think you're gonna talk about this, capture as much market share as possible, and leverage other parts of their business to do it. So can you offer some insight into what some of our audience, a regional grocery audience, can discern as Walmart continues to grow?
Yeah. So when you talk about throwing all the resources at it, let's just start with retail media as an example. Go on to Walmart's app, do a generic search for a given product. So don't state the name or the brand, and you're going to get hit with up to 4 featured or sponsored ads before you get into the relevant search. You look at a large national supermarket retailer like Albertsons, most likely it's going to be 0. You even look at Kroger, maybe it's 1. If you compare it against Target, it's 2. So Walmart is throwing a lot of ads out there that's generating a lot of high margin revenue for them that is helping offset other investments that they're making. Part of that is helping to drive those sales. The other thing is people need to realize that, okay, Walmart has the largest share, so this shouldn't be surprising. But the magnitude of the volume of orders that Walmart does is astronomical compared to others. I mean, you have probably on an average per store day, Walmart doing around 200 or more orders through pickup and delivery. And that volume, that scale of orders at the store level is creating a lot of efficiencies that are helping Walmart drive costs out of the system. And they're doing that because of that order volume. And the challenge for the supermarkets is, technology is only going to enable efficiencies up to a point until you are reliant on getting more order volume in a set period of time that can create a faster flywheel. So those are just 2 examples. But again, the way Walmart has approached the business has been different than the way supermarkets have. And we can talk about that if you like.
Walmart is not bleeding volume; they're gaining volume, and often it's at the expense of a lot of the of regionals, especially in that center aisle, very competitive product category, as well as dairy, and in what leaves regionals with just elements of the perimeter, the fresh produce, the dairy, and the deli and the bakery goods as well. How can regionals, who typically are priced much higher than Walmart, compete for customers who are in this environment still looking for ways to save money?
There's a lot of different ways. I think, what we're not trying to suggest is any kind of direct head-to-head price comparison, because we know where that's going to fall.
Yep.
But it's finding additional ways that you can provide to your customers that allow them to save money. It is empowering them through choices, right? So again, one way you could help them save is by really emphasizing private label. So for instance, Kroger's doing this right now. If you would be doing a generic search on their mobile app, they'll lead with the private label in a generic search. And that would be a kind of a best practice that we've documented in the past.
Yep.
If it's a branded search, they'll return the relevant results. So one is when the customer isn't naming the brand, offering the lower price alternative, which has a stronger penny profit or margin for the retailer, makes a lot of sense. It's a win-win. You could look at your loyalty programs and increase and promote the member-only deals. We see that at a lot of the regionals, which has been primarily in store, but you can still push that out through your email marketing efforts and tie it into your digital storefront.
And there's a lot of regionals that still don't have a solid grasp on their customer base, the segmentation of that customer base, to be able to market to them in order to make those relevant engagement in order to propose those deals.
Yeah, I mean, the supermarket customer base from our vantage point, so a very macro view, is different than Walmart's. Walmart's is very similar, not surprising to that of all of these in the hard discount, right, in terms of income level distribution across their customer base. But even so that, regional grocers may skew slightly higher income, they still have a sizable segment in that under 100,000 or even more so under the 50,000 that are the ones who are really searching for ways to take pressure off the purse strings. And so any and every way you can think of should be, front and center today as a regional, simply to, minimize or slow, the leak in your sales bucket. The center store you talk about, Mark, is really hard to defend. Those products, especially the national brands, are available everywhere. So there really isn't a competitive advantage to carrying a national brand when you're going to lose on a direct price comparison. So that's where private label is becoming much more important, especially in the center store, to compete and protect center store sales from the mass discount, and Walmart in particular.
David, the report mentions that Walmart is primarily driven its overall share gains by a delivery. Now, we've highlighted their efforts around Walmart, the membership program, Walmart Plus. What should other grocers realize about their approach? What is distinguishing this? How Walmart is gaining their share via delivery?
Yeah, I think one perspective I'd like to just share at the beginning is recognizing that Walmart introduced their grocery home delivery in 2018. So they were ahead of COVID, but not by much, right? There were other retailers who were further ahead at that point than Walmart. By that time, Walmart had been in pickup for probably 4 or 5 years. They led with pickup. They rolled that out and achieved effectively full distribution. And then they set their sights on delivery. And about 18 months ago, really kind of started to press the accelerator. And Walmart Plus, when they added, I think it was Paramount Plus streaming services to the offer, was one of the points where they really started to push. And then more recently, in the last 3-4 months, we've seen extremely strong, aggressive pushes to convert more customers to members. And it's been quite successful. One of the things that Walmart does is differently than most supermarkets is their emphasis and focus, almost singular focus on first party on the delivery side. It is true that Walmart is on a third-party marketplace. That would be Instacart. But what we've seen looking at their coverage across the top 100 markets is that they're in less than 20% of those markets. And what we've further learned has been that that's really the function of their ability to roll out their first-party distribution service, right? So retailers, supermarkets need to realize a couple things. One, Walmart is trying to funnel or shape demand in favor of first party. And
Yep.
where the third party plays a role is kind of supplemental market coverage where we're just not ready with the scale to drive that first party distribution.
So let me ask you this question, because what I'm sensing is post-COVID, you've got a lot of regionals who are now thinking, okay, pre-COVID, Instacart, big bad, don't want to have too much dependency on them. Post-COVID, you've got Instacart as a third-party marketplace. You've got DoorDash. You've got Uber Eats. Sort of spreading the risk across multiple third-party marketplaces. Do we really need to focus on a first-party experience? What are your thoughts there?
Again, there's two schools of thought there. I mean, one comes from the marketer's perspective, one comes from the merchant's perspective. If I'm just looking at having a service that's available so I don't get customer complaints, and someone offers me kind of a no-cost option of the ones you've listed, there are, providers who are, setting up, storefronts for retailers, and there is no cost to the retailer. So in those cases, the retailer may view that as, well, that's a free service. There's no margin compression. We're getting the same margin as we would in store. Why wouldn't we do it? Well, the marketer then would say, well, we're losing a connection, a valuable connection and insight into who our customer is and what they want. I mean, Instacart or some of those others, depending on who you are as a retailer, may not share that detail with you. Right now, many retailers may get the specifics of who's buying and that, but there are many large ones for a variety of reasons that don't get that. And so if you're building any first party, pickup, delivery, or both, the marketer would look at it as, well, we want to maintain that connection because then we can understand the value of that customer and we can better serve that customer. But it also can help us monetize other strategies like our own retail media strategy that requires eyeballs and traffic to drive that. And furthermore, it could create other efficiencies within assembly and distribution that we're not taking advantage of because in our first party, we may be assembling orders with our own staff. And then the third party, they may be doing it themselves. So we're not getting the scale efficiencies from the additional volume. And that's where Walmart has played a longer game where, a lot of retailers will talk about we want to be where our customers are. And, that's a general statement. But I think what Walmart's essentially signaling is, we want to be where customers are shopping, but we want them to be shopping directly with us or from us. That is the vision. So I think if you look 5 years down the road and ask, will Walmart still be on a third-party platform in the U.S.? My response would be not if they, achieve their own internal goals, which is to continue to grow this business directly with their customers through first party.
Sounds like it's a tug of war between the merchandisers and the marketers within a regional. What would you say to the executive, to the board of a regional, if they wanted to secure a strategy going forward? Where should they be providing their direction? To which department, which team?
Well, I guess I would start with what type of relationship do you want to have with your customer? Mm-hmm. And who do you consider your customer? I mean, do you consider a household that buys from your store on the third party your customer? If yes, then how can you better serve them? Well, in order to do that, you need to better understand them. And in order to do that, you need to have visibility into their buying behaviors and patterns, right? I mean, your algorithms are not going to be, useful in triggering behaviors that benefit both parties without that type of insight. So at that point, I would say knowledge is power, right? And whoever possesses the data inherently has the knowledge, which means the balance of power shifts to those who have the data. So I would kind of frame it up that way first. And then for those retailers who are looking at that, and especially those who've already invested in first party, is how can you improve your return on that investment and what ways are we open to considering to do that, right? I mean, pricing is one
Yeah.
example. Channel strategy is another. None of these are going to be, layups in the form of, these are no brainers, right? Just like we've talked about pricing for a long time. That's a gray swan for us in forecast, even though we are a proponent for regionals of taking a bifurcated view of pricing online versus in store. We also recognize the Herculean lift that's going to be for many because of the uncertainty or the headline risk that could come from that. We still believe it's a good thing to do, and we believe the evidence points to that. Same thing on the customer side. It's just really what is their culture and commitment to their customer, and that will come out in those conversations. I mean,
Yeah.
otherwise, e-commerce right now or online in many of these regionals is still siloed and fighting for resources from the store team, right? And so if you're overseeing the entire enterprise and online represents 10% or likely less if we're only looking at
Well,
delivery and pickup, and they're not getting necessarily the investment that would be required to do that. And on top of it, let's keep in mind that Instacart has 1,500 engineers working like overtime, shooting out a lot of innovation. But at the same time that's happening, there's still a sniff concern amongst a large group of retailers about ceding control of that connection with their customer. So I think that is at the very heart of it.
I got one last question. So what else should supermarkets or regional grocers realize about what's aiding Walmart's user growth online beyond the economic environment and the financial pressures that households are currently facing?
There's the economic variables, and then there's the strategic ones. And some of the strategic ones we've already talked about, the emphasis and really significant focus on first party, to the increased emphasis in distributing delivery through first party distribution. But if we step back and we talk about that mobile app, right? The
Yep.
power of that mobile app isn't just to support shopping online. But let's remember when there was a previous executive overseeing their online from an acquisition, that Walmart not too long ago had two separate mobile apps because that executive, who's no longer there, had said, we have two apps because they're two different shopping experiences or missions. Well, we understood at that point that wasn't true, and we've kind of been proven on that. But what they've done is developed an incredibly powerful mobile app with functionality geared to support in-store shopping as well as online. And that has put it literally in the hands of more of their customers because of that utilitarian value. And when it does that, it just creates a ripe environment for attracting more online sales because they already have the app. They've already been using the app. And now Walmart can see, I mean, I can see it. They can track, like Target has been tracking for years, your transactions in store, online, at the item level, and giving that information to the customer. So that's very empowering in so many ways, whether you're talking about it from the customer standpoint, like myself, if I'm shopping, or from the retailers when it comes to marketing and targeting offers specifically to different subsegments.
What I can share is, inexplicably, and sometimes when you have conversations with grocery retail executives, there's this hint of they're averse to taking risks. They don't want to mess with what they think is working. Despite the data that you're presenting and the examples that you're sharing, they won't entertain an idea like combining an e-commerce solution with a loyalty or an engagement application. So they will continue to have this bifurcated experience despite the evidence that you present. And it's an interesting interplay. You have retail cultures that embrace risk and take chances and experiment, and those that are just hidebound to these traditional methods of marketing and merchandising. And I do think that it requires a leadership intervention or change or generational change at the top before you eventually get buy-in to what should be done, despite the data that you're presenting and we're sharing.
In fairness, Walmart, like Instacart, has a lot more resources at their disposal than the regional grocers. That, however, shouldn't be the reason or an excuse given for why we don't do it. And to your point, the bigger concern is if the belief system or the assumptions that those regional grocers have is a general reluctance or skepticism about the importance of having that. I would then just, direct them to looking at the data. What does the data tell you, right? You can argue with me about my point of view on things, but then let's turn to the data and see what the data is showing us. What we're seeing is that households that primarily identify Walmart as their main store for groceries not only are more likely to be online, but when those that are online, they're significantly more likely to shop with Walmart. So Walmart has their membership program with Walmart Plus, through all their other strategies, really done a very effective job of increasing share of wallet within their existing customer base and driving more loyalty from that base with these tie-ups that they have. And again, what can retailers learn from that is, how can we apply similar strategies or tactics in our business where it makes sense, right? When you look at their business, pickup's still very healthy, but again, that has reached a level of maturity much more quickly for them than delivery. And so then they pivoted to delivery, and we've seen this really accelerated growth in market share over the last 12 to 18 months with them. These things aren't all driven by the economy. Yes, when interest rates lower and the financial pressure loosens slightly on the purse strings, Walmart will have to work hard to keep all that market share that they gain, because there is a concern, even amongst former Walmart executives, that they will not be able to maintain and hold all those customers when the economic pressures release. Now, what will also determine that to a degree is how well Walmart continues to deliver against the promise of shopping with them. And some of those customers may find it more than acceptable and have no reason to shift even in an improving economy. That should be the big concern for the regionals, because they will benefit with an improving economy as the pressure gets taken off of those households. But still, waiting for that to happen isn't a component of strategy, right?
No.
So
I can tell you, I was talking with a regional grocery executive yesterday who was sharing with me how his spouse, who had previously been buying from Amazon, so gross center aisle and some perimeter product, has now shifted to Walmart because there's no cost for delivery. Would not set foot in a Walmart store, but is perfectly happy to take advantage of the free delivery, whether it's same day or next day, to the household. And I think Walmart's doing a very good job of disintermediating Amazon, especially in the grocery space, when it comes to that expectation between click to deliver experience.
Also disintermediating a competitive advantage that regional supermarkets have when competing against Walmart in the physical world. And delivery removes that piece. And if you're wondering what that is, that's proximity to the customer.
Yeah.
Regional grocers win in the physical world against Walmart when customers value convenience of shopping near their home or on their way to home, right? Most people are, like me, less than a mile from their primary store, whereas Walmart for me is 5 miles away. So the trade-off I make to save money is to spend more time to drive to and from. Now, when it comes to delivery, I don't have the to and from aspect. And to your point, Walmart's effectively moving towards free delivery. I mean, that's their message. And so if, again, you look out 3 to 5 years, their goal is to really emphasize that there's very little cost associated with shopping online versus shopping in the store. When that happens, that's a really high hurdle for anyone else to overcome, because again, retail media is helping offset some of that investment. The volume is helping drive labor efficiencies, which is in offsetting that investment. So if retailers try to chase Walmart to free delivery, and again, Walmart's doing that through their subscription program, well, they're going to have another rude awakening that this really just compresses margins all the more for them, because they're not looking at what makes them different and how they can separate themselves. So this is where, pickup again still is an area we believe that, regional grocers have an opportunity to continue to grow and use as a way to defend against some of that sales leakage going to Walmart. It is very hard to see how regional grocers do that in the delivery segment, given all the things that we've talked about.
So on that note, we'll wrap it up, and I think that's a great indication of what supermarkets should be doing to combat or reverse the trend that we're seeing in this market share report. And David, so what's upcoming? I know we continue with the monthly eGrocery insights. Well, what else can we share that's going to be coming in the second half of this year?
Yeah, so coming in a couple months, just this month, we're going to be starting efforts around our annual sales benchmarking of eGrocery in the U.S. with regional grocers. So we're excited to get that up and running again. I think this is our third or fourth consecutive year. We've done it for longer than that, even before COVID, but we did have a slight pause during the first 2 years of the pandemic. So we're looking forward to doing that. We're already having some conversations with regionals to gauge interest in participating once again. So we look forward to see what comes from that.
And we look forward to helping get that out into the hands of grocery retail executives.
Yeah, and again, I would just encourage retailers to reach out to Mercatus, or specifically to Mark, to get their hands on those reports, and then also take him and us up on that opportunity to have a conversation or discussion about what we're seeing and what that may mean for your business. And we're not going to have all the answers, but the point is we're going to instigate and challenge that status quo and ask what we can do differently, because clearly something's got to change, just given the trajectory that we're seeing in the market share.
Very good. Don't be shy, folks. David, thank you. As always, we'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, Mark.